Unlike most stories you've heard, this one starts at the end. In San Francisco, California, 1941. The sound of a gunshot in a back alley. As cars can be heard in the distance, a body lay motionless on the floor. As blood begins to pool around the wound to his chest, he gives into death's enthrall and succumbs to his injuries. That lifeless husk is Marco Cohen, private detective/journalist, on a case to discover and report findings of an investigation into one of the biggest companies at the time, Sabre Unlimited. A tech company revolutionizing the way technology was seen. Their work had been great, but some of the technology enhanced human lives and genetics, which rapidly grew the economy and quality of life for all. No one would have been willing to look into the company after all the good they've been doing, but such a big company is not without its downfalls. This was the purpose for Marco's investigation, to find such downfalls, and it inevitably led him to where he is now, abandoned and forgotten by all in a narrow, damp alley. Marco, with his last dying breath, says,
"This accursed job has finally done me in, and on the verge of the case of the century, no less,"
he says as he passes on. Then something strange happens. Marco's spirit begins to detach from his body, but doesn't ascend. Instead, it remains in the realm of the living. Confused, Marco says,
"Why am I still here?"
From the heavens, an otherworldly voice, with an image and stature too bright to see, says,
"Because there is something required of you. The atrocities being committed at this point in time go strictly against the laws of human nature."
Okay, but what does that have to do with me?
Human evolution takes time, and this period shouldn't be anywhere near this advanced. I am a being who is referred to by most as an envoy of the gods that governs this world. They go by many names, and they collectively govern the fundamental laws of human nature.
So what have you done to me? I can't I see my own body? Why can't people see me?
I took the liberty of separating your spirit from your body just before you died. Now, unfortunately, that's the best I can do, and you'll have to manage.
Okay, with that in mind, what can I do to get out of this? I've only recently been looking for Sabre, and the first lead I got led me to my death.
When you ascend, you will be offered to also become an envoy of the gods along with me. This right is only offered to you due to the situation's importance, and since no one else is willing to even look into Sabre.
What would happen if I didn't mix up the case?
Well, you will be judged like all mortals, and if found guilty of your crimes when you were living, you will be sent to the underworld.
Marco, thinking about the stories he's had to chase, the people he's had to betray, and the people who have come to hate him for his work just to get the story, knowing that Marco made his choice.
I'll take the case, only because I know where I'll go if I don't.
Delightful. Your spirit's body will interact with the outside world and possess others. I will look forward to your results.
With that, Marco's mission changed, and his purpose for the mission changed as well. With a chance at something new, a passion that hadn't been there before. If not for fear of what would happen if he didn't, then for the fact that the biggest case in history was in the palm of his hands. All Marco could do was tremble with immense fear and excitement. With a new lease on life, Marco, a now spirit, walks the earth alone to have a chance at becoming an envoy, for the consequences of failing the case are dire. Shortly after the envoy's presence dissipates, Marco contemplates the events that precede, steals himself, and says,
I left off. Last I remember checking into was an informant. Hello, club. An informant in Sabre.
Marco begins to feel his surroundings, realizing that he can physically interact with his surroundings, but not seen by anyone. Marco reaches out at the street lamp nearby and sticks his arm out to find that he is starting to feel weak. A shriek of terror rains out and Marco staggers and finds a pedestrian staring at a see-through invisible hand. Marco's hand. Realizing this, Marco immediately took his hand out of the light. Marco says,
You never said anything about sensitivity to lights.
Marco looked around for potential subjects. He spots a man in a long trench coat strolling down the street. Marco jumps at the chance and inhibits the man, saying,
Body literally. I can tell whether or not somebody remembers what they've done when I possess them. Sort of like their conscience taking a back seat.
After figuring out his newfound body works, Marco heads down to the Sinaloa Club, the city's most renowned jazz club. As Marco enters the club and jazz fills the air, Marco makes his way towards the back where his informant lay patiently waiting. Marco, looking around for someone to possess, catches the eye of the club's owner, Vanessa Roberts. Marco rushes towards her and takes possession of her. Marco walks towards the informant with caution. Marco possessed Vanessa says,
I've heard you've been very hard on work recently.
"Who are you? You're not the one who I'm supposed to be meeting here. Where's the detective?"
He ran into some trouble and won't be able to make it, but I'm a close personal friend of his, so I can deliver the message.
The informant, sensing danger, turns to leave the table, but Vanessa reaches out for his hand and yells.
Wait!
The commotion stuns the crowd briefly, but continues to ignore it. Vanessa continues.
This information may be more crucial than you know, so please trust that this information will get to the detective. I'll be sure of it.
The informant cautiously retakes his seat in the booth and says, "My name is John Miller. I called you because I believe that the experiments being performed there are now going beyond the lines of conventional science as we know it. I was hired by Sabre as an assistant scientist to the head of the CEO, Wilson White. I believe that Sabre was meant to help the world, but most of their experiences are shrouded in mystery.
If you believed in what the company was doing, then why leave?
They were figuring out ways to extend human lives, cure different diseases, and change your very genetics, all either under development or nearly done. The information on all those projects is heavily protected, and the only one with ample access to the info is CEO Chief Scientist Wilson. But I grew suspicious of Sabre's methods of obtaining such advanced information, so I snuck into Wilson's office and searched through his computer, and I could only find one address after finding out that I was discovered and ran, but I wasn't chased after for some reason." John hands Vanessa the address and reads,
2306 4th and Main. Didn't think it'd be by the docks. You said they let you go?
"I pretty much left, hid out for a bit, contacted the detective, and I've been sitting here waiting patiently." The sound of a gunshot rings out outside of the club. 4 armed guards walk into the club as people begin to flood out and scream. The guards scan the crowd and spots Marco and the informant. One of the guards waves his gun at Vanessa and says,
"Leave if you know what's good for you."
Vanessa does as the man says and runs out of the club terrified. John, begging and pleading for his life, yells, "Please don't do this. I can come back. I swear. I haven't told anyone. I don't need to die. No one needs to die."
Unfortunately, you need to.
Stunned by what just happened, Marco releases his control of Vanessa and she says, rubbing her head,
What happened?
as she stares at the front of the club, horrified at the sight of one of the club's bouncers on the floor outside and the club empty, deserted, with shattered glass and drinks all over the floor. She runs away in fear. Marco, shaken by the experience, stares at the empty club and floats in to see John's motionless body on the floor. Marco says,
I knew the situation was serious, but to go to these extremes must mean they want to bury someone by any means necessary. John, your sacrifice will not be in vain.
As rain continues to thunder down the streets of San Francisco, Marco, contemplating his next move, says,
What business would Sabre be involved in at the docks?
Marco proceeds to float on the docks where seagulls and boats can be heard in the distance. Marco begins to search around but finds nothing but empty warehouses and storage containers. Annoyed, Marco says,
Surely the address couldn't have been wrong. John couldn't have died for nothing. What did 2306 mean? 4th and Main is merely the street that the dock is on. What is the point of adding 2306?
Then, Marco has a realization and begins to frantically look around for something until he finally pauses for a moment and sees the number 2301 on the side of a warehouse. Marco then says,
Wait, the numbers he gave are on the side of the warehouse.
Marco now understands what is needed as he floats, counting
2302, 2303, 2304, 2305. Finally, 2306.
Marco pauses at both of the rusted doors and looks at the warehouse with twisted metal shutters, broken windows, dilapidated shutters, and garbage strewn about. Whatever is within the warehouse gave an impression of immediate dominance and terror towards Marco. Marco, half-jokingly, says,
Well, this doesn't bode well.
Marco, finally working up the gumption to enter the dilapidated warehouse, floats in to find a horrific sight. The sounds of cries for help echo off the metal walls of the warehouse as Marco stares at multiple rows of cryogenic pods, each one with a different person inside, frozen completely. On his right-hand side, he sees human test tubes with a manner of creatures inside. To Marco's horror, he spots someone strapped to a table, barely alive, and calling for help. Marco floats towards the man and questions,
What is this? What have they done here? This isn't right. Most of these people look homeless, and I'm willing to bet they are.
Then, footsteps begin to echo off the floor of the warehouse. A frail figure wearing a white lab coat begins to come into the picture and says,
Don't worry, this is for the betterment of everyone.
The frail scientist begins to bring a drill across the room to the man strapped to the table. Marco inhibits the scientist immediately and says,
No, I am done here.
Marco begins to unstrap the man from the table. As the man runs away in terror, Marco moves towards the Bunsen burner on the table and lights it. Marco, enraged at what he has seen, tosses the Bunsen burner towards a leaking test tube at the warehouse begins to light on fire. Not satisfied with the amount burnt, Marco continues to stay in the fire as its flame begins to engulf the scientist. While the fire continues to rage, Marco relinquishes his control of the scientist. Flustered, the scientist says,
What happened here?
Dazed and confused, the scientist stares at the ruins of his former laboratory. He runs away frantically from the fire only to hear a car screaming down the street towards him. The scientist runs as best as he can, but eventually he trips and the fatal mistake would cost him as the car stops.
Old man, you've made your last mistake. Bring him in.
As the car speeds off into the distance, Marco, thinking about what his next steps are, says,
Well, at the very least, the warehouse is gone. Nothing like that should ever exist. I'm glad that it burned, but something just doesn't add up. If that warehouse truly was favored, then why was there no response to when it was being burned?
Marco thinks back on the event the scientist fled the warehouse and continues.
The car had no license plate, along with the fact that instead of responding to the actual fires by trying to put it out, they simply took the scientist instead. Almost as if they wanted what was in there to be burnt, to leave no trace.
Realizing this, Marco concludes that Saber has sent a response team immediately to the situation and that they had just taken the culprit of the fire. Marco, with his end goal in sight, starts to make his way towards Saber HQ. Meanwhile, in the car on the way to Saber's, the scientist says,
I insist you tell me where we are going. My name is Brian Cooper. I'm a scientist for Saber. Tell me why I'm tied up.
We're taking a trip to see Wilson White. He'd like an explanation for why you burned down his warehouse.
You can't just take me there against my will. At the very least, you could have asked, and the situation could have been dealt with calmly.
Well, this wasn't a request. We can and are bringing you in, whether you like it or not.
Could you at least tell me your names? It would be helpful if I knew what to call you.
Well, since I highly doubt you'll be sticking around for much longer, I'm Ryan and he's Riley.
Brian's disposition grew cold with the words he just heard, and from then on, the ride to Saber's had remained quiet. Saber's building was terrifyingly tall, almost like the entire Empire State Building. In the city of San Francisco, there was no other building like it, and considering its construction was just newly finished, a building of complete white. If you stared at it for too long, it feels like you would be absorbed by it. You would have thought the building would be host to the most lavish people in the world, or a place where the wealthy regularly commune. In a city that saw very little color, Saber's building was a true one-of-a-kind marvel of architecture. The car parks into the parking garage as Ryan yanks Brian out of the car as he hits the parking garage floor with a hard thud. Brian is escorted to the building as he looks around and sees very little staff, with there only being people walking here and there. Brian says,
For a high-tech company, you don't have lots of people on site.
Well, most of it isn't needed since we are tech-based. A lot of this is automated, including security and the occasional secretary.
The group of three enter into the elevator. As they are lifted above the clouds until the elevator comes to a stop on the top floor, Wilson's office. Wilson's office sat at the end of a long, white and narrow halfway. Its intimidating presence could be felt as soon as the top floor was reached. Riley and Ryan drag Brian into the front of Wilson's office. Ryan knocks on the door and a stern voice promptly says,
Come in.
Wilson's office was made of complete glass with the entirety of San Francisco being in view. His office had a balcony on the right side of the room next to where his desk stood, as he was facing directly towards the window, looking over the city. Ryan then says,
We've brought him as requested, sir.
Good, both of you have done good work today. You may leave now.
Ryan and Riley quickly leave the room, breathing a sigh of relief as they leave. Once gone, Wilson says,
Run to meet the future, or it's going to run you down. Do you know what this means?
Meet the future head on instead of waiting for it.
Well, not exactly. You see, the future is a very, very fickle thing, with most of it being unknown. It's important to make sure every variable is accounted for, so that the future doesn't look so ominous. Do you know what we do here, Brian?
Well, beyond technological advancement, we seek the betterment of everyone as a whole.
Good. You understand then how important our research is here.
Yes, our research seems to be important enough to be shared with the world.
Take a walk with me.
Brian is led to Wilson's balcony where the sounds of the city instantly flood all at once. Wilson continues,
You have no idea how important the work we do here is. You may think you know, but undoubtedly, you don't.
I don't understand, sir.
I know you don't, but that's to be expected. Let me fill you in. In your future, there is no hope for humanity. Your extinction is extremely likely. Even with advanced technology, we are plagued by our inability to evolve. An extinction-level war, which no victor will be crowned, triggers a virus that would destroy the human body system from the inside out. I know not when or how the virus appeared, but our bodies aren't capable of fighting off the virus. This company is built on the basis of preventing that very same tragic future. With our experiments, they are all in the name to save the future by any means. So setbacks cannot happen.
Wait, any means? You don't mean. Look, I became a scientist here to help others, but this cost is too high. The world will have to know what you've done here. I resign.
Well, if that's all then.
Wilson grabs Brian, then, with a heave, throws him off the balcony, but much to his dismay, Brian hangs on to the railing. Wilson yells down,
The world mustn't stand in the way of progress. And unfortunately, you're an obstacle.
Wilson begins to stomp on Brian's hands until eventually he falls into the cloud below. Wilson taps a button on his desk and Ryan and Riley appear.
Boys, could you go deal with a stain at the bottom of the building, please? And be discreet about it.
Yes, sir.
As they leave the room, Wilson looks over San Francisco and says,
The world will be ready one day, but for now, lives must be lost for the greater good.
Keep listening to find out what happens in the next thrilling chapter of City Heights.